In this Learning Lab Let's Play live stream, we're going to be focused on instructors. So if you're an instructor, you're in the right place. Also, if you use Facebook, consider joining the Learning Lab instructors on Facebook. There's a private group there, and players join to get questions answered with instructors giving them support. So look for that. And then also look in the video description below for other helpful information. I'm glad you're joining me today. If you have any questions about running a teaching practice, feel free to write it in the live stream chat. And if you're watching the repost, feel free to write that in the comment section below the video. I do have a topic picked out for us today, so I want to give you just a couple minutes to pose any questions you may have, and then we'll get to our topic. I think it'll be a interesting topic because it's something that I've been studying myself lately. So it's not only something that I've been wanting to share with you, but it's something that I'm currently learning myself. Let's see if we have any questions so far. Welcome. Hello. Oh, we have a new channel member. I just want to say thank you, Barbara, for joining MAHJLIFE. All right, so let me know how long you've been playing the game, and then let me know also how long you have been teaching. So in one reply, just so I can kind of have a frame of reference, how long have you been playing, comma, how long you've been teaching, number, and that'll give me a good idea of who we have with us today. Regardless of how long you've been playing or teaching, the topic will meet your needs, I think. I'll just give you a couple seconds here to think about that. And you don't have to comment. You're free to if you feel like you want to, but it's optional. Okay, so I don't see any comments so far. Feel free to use that live stream chat anytime you want. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my notes and we'll get started with today's topic. Let's see. And then also, if you're new to the Learning Lab Instructor Edition, every episode that we do is recorded and reposted. So if you happen to miss one, you'll be able to watch it at your convenience. And then there are also show notes for every episode. So if you've missed one, you'll even be able to access the notes that we have for that particular day. So there'll always be a topic and then show notes and a link to the video. And I will show you how to access that at the end of the session today. So today's topic is listening with intention. And listening is easier said than done, because more times than not, we all have an agenda. We all have places to go, people to see, things to say. So it takes some self-control to listen, to be a good listener. Takes skill, takes effort sometimes, especially when emotions come into play. So I'm going to do some reading and then we'll chat. I also have some prompts for you to think about. And again, if you feel up to it, put your responses in the live stream chat, or if you're watching the repost, in the video description below. So here we go. This session focuses on what happens after Socratic question is asked. So Socratic questions, if you don't already know, is open-ended questions. So instead of teaching or telling somebody what to do or how to do something, you ask questions where the listener will then find the answer themselves. And if they don't, then you ask more questions. So follow-up questions after you hear what they have to say. And if you want to know more about Socratic questions, we did a talk before this episode, And there's a link to this in the show notes. So you can go back to the other 2 sessions. Actually, this is number 2 of 3. So there's one before this about Socratic questions, open-ended questions. And then we have this one, and then we're going to have one more after this. That is basically what to do after you get an answer. So that will be next week. So now, let's see. Building on the first talk of the series, instructors explore active listening as a core Mahjong teaching skill, one that determines whether a question leads to insight or confusion. So you could continue to ask questions until you're certain that the person that you're trying to help gets the point and they find it themselves. That's the goal. Through the practices of giving full attention, showing curiosity, reflecting back, and checking for understanding, instructors learn how to interpret student responses accurately and choose an appropriate teaching response. Active listening is framed as a decision-making tool that protects student autonomy while increasing instructional clarity. So basically, you're asking questions, they're answering, sometimes with an answer, but sometimes with a question. You're listening and then asking more questions. Now, sometimes, depending on the path or that little journey, the communication journey, you may need to jump in and do a little teaching or coaching or mentoring. But the goal is to create space for the student to find the answers themselves, because then they can take ownership of it and leave with more confidence. There's a difference between finding the answer yourself or coming to a conclusion yourself versus giving somebody the answer. It's kind of like that saying, give a man a fish and he'll eat for the day, but teach a man to fish and he'll eat for life. This is the same concept. You're teaching students to ask themselves even the right questions so that they could find the answers themselves. So here are some questions. After asking a strong Socratic question, so remember, Socratic questioning is open-ended questions. So after you ask an open-ended question, how confident are you that you truly understood the student's thinking before responding? So you ask the question, the student gives an answer, and then you listen, and how confident are you that the student understood what you were asking? So that takes a little bit of critical thinking sometimes, especially if the questions are complex. So you have to train yourself to not respond right away. Leave space. Silence is good. You want to take a breath and think yourself before speaking. So I'll just repeat the question for reflection. After asking a strong Socratic question, how confident are you that you truly understood the student's thinking before responding? I'll give you just a minute. I'm going to practice listening and leaving space so you can think about that for a few seconds. So if a student responds in a way that you are anticipating, that you are hoping for in a certain response, then you can move on to whatever it is that you're teaching or training or focused on. If they don't, you'll want to have follow-up questions. So instead of jumping in just to teach or fix or what have you, you want to ask more questions until they get to that point where they're providing the correct, or not correct response, but they're responding the way that you're anticipating them to respond. Because sometimes there's no right or wrong. There could be multiple ways of doing things, especially when it comes to playing mahjong. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And you know that when you look at a set of tiles, for example, when playing a game, that you can take the tiles in many directions from one point going forward, and people can go different directions with the same tiles and have good results after that. So it's not about right or wrong. It's about results. It's about whether or not the statement or the answer is actionable. If it needs a little tweaking, you may need to ask more questions. All right, so now the next question is, when a student answers your question, are you listening for understanding, or listening for the mistake you expect to hear? This kind of goes into the anticipation. What are you anticipating? Or are you just open to what they're saying so that you can understand where they're coming from or where their mindset is? I'll give you a minute to think about that, or a few seconds, because I have a quote to share with you that I learned many years ago. So I'll let you think about that for just a minute. I'm going to repeat it. When a student answers your question, are you listening for understanding or listening for the mistake you expect to hear? This reminds me of a quote that I heard from a Stephen Covey workshop that I went to. Actually, it was a training. It was like a week-long training. And the quote that I'll never forget is, seek first to understand. Seek first to understand. Now, typically, I think of that quote when it comes to debates, arguments, misunderstandings, maybe a heated conversation, disagreements. I think about seek first to understand, or even interpersonal issues that need resolutions. So I think about that quote, seek first to understand. But if you think about that when you're asking questions, it might help you remember that you're supposed to be looking for, or making sure that you are in a place where you're seeking understanding rather than looking for mistakes to correct or fix. Okay, next is, how often do you feel the urge to explain or correct before the student has finished articulating their thought? That's a big one. This is where self-control comes in. How often do you feel the urge to explain or correct before the student has finished articulating their thought? This again comes back to space, leaving space for people to think, give them time to think and answer, and then you think yourself before you speak, or provide another question, or maybe affirm, confirm, encourage, whatever it is that they've said. All right, so now, any thoughts on this so far? We talked about Socratic questioning, what it is, and about active listening, listening for understanding, seek first to understand, creating space for people to think, and not interrupting. That's where character comes in. You're as an instructor, your character will be tested. Trust and believe. You've got to train yourself to not interrupt and give people time to articulate an answer so that you know how to respond. All right, so I don't see any questions or comments, so we're going to go on to the talking points now. There are 4 talking points here. The first one is active listening is the instructor's companion skill to Socratic questioning. A Socratic question surfaces what a student is thinking. Active listening reveals how that thinking is structured. Active listening reveals how the thinking, that thinking is structured. So the Socratic question surfaces what the student is thinking, but your listening reveals how that thinking is structured. So it's a it's a partnership. You're in a conversation. So you've got to seek to understand. Giving full attention means setting aside internal scripts. This again is where that character testing comes in, because I'm sure as a human being, everybody gets a little anxious and wants to get in their point, speak their mind. You know, we all, especially if you're a confident person, you'll want to speak your mind, but you've got to give people space. So giving full attention means setting aside internal scripts, the rule you expect them to cite, the correction you're ready to deliver, or the next teaching point you have already queued up in your head. In Mahjong lessons, divided attention often leads instructors to respond to what they anticipated instead of what was actually said. So anticipation versus what was actually said. And if you train yourself to allow space, not only for the student to articulate their answer or to find the answer first and then articulate it, and then give yourself time to listen and then respond as well. You got to allow for space, and silence is okay. It's okay for there to be silence. Active listening is the instructor's companion skill to Socratic questioning. The next point is showing curiosity shifts the instructor's stance from evaluator to investigator. So instead of listening to judge correctness, the instructor listens for patterns, basically what the student emphasizes, what they skip, or how they reason through uncertainty. So you're leaving space to observe. You're investigating. You got on an investigator hat. You're observing. You're an observer for part of that communication journey or experience. Curiosity helps instructors distinguish between confusion, exploration, and emerging insight. And that all takes time. So that goes back to space, creating a space for thinking and articulating, and then active listening and responding. That all needs time. So the bottom line is they're all different. Confusion, exploration, emerging insight, they're all a little different, and you can observe them, and even with their facial expressions and body language, a lot of times you can sort of differentiate between them so that you can come up with an appropriate response, because the way you respond to confusion is going to be different than the way you respond to somebody who has emerging insight. You might need to ask more questions to clear up confusion. You might need to ask more questions to encourage their curiosity, to foster curiosity so that they explore. And then if they responded with insight, then you can encourage them and move on to the next point. So showing curiosity shifts the instructor's stance from evaluator to investigator. Next, reflecting back is how instructors test their interpretation before acting. Reflecting back, it's kind of like mirroring. Reflection names meaning, not just words, and gives students a chance to hear their own thinking and refine or redirect it. This step prevents instructors from solving the wrong problem or introducing instruction that isn't actually needed. So you use mirroring or replaying what you heard to confirm your understanding. And once you have that confirmation, then you can move on to the next step, whether it be more questions or the next learning objective. And then the last talking point is checking for understanding completes the instructional loop. Rather than assuming alignment, instructors explicitly confirm whether their reflection matches the student's intent. This step protects learner autonomy and helps instructors decide whether to explain, ask another question, or intentionally step back and let learning unfold. So I kind of jumped ahead to that. So checking for understanding completes the loop. So it's a 4-step process. Active listening is the student's or the instructor's companion skill to Socratic questioning. Showing curiosity shifts the instructor stance from evaluator to investigator. Reflecting back is how instructors test their interpretation before acting. And then finally, checking for understanding completes the instructional loop. And then you go back to the front where you're asking Socratic questioning. Socratic questioning invites thinking. Active listening interprets the thinking. Instructional judgment depends on both. So to be a good teacher, you need to know how to ask the right questions, how many questions, and then how to listen and reflect to confirm what you've heard before moving on with instruction. That's how you reach students. Listening with intention is what allows instructors to respond to learning as it is, not as they expected it to be. All right, so listening. This is something that I've always had to work on because I get excited. And when I'm excited, I not only speak my mind, of course, but I also talk loud. I get very loud when I'm excited or upset. My voice raises. When I'm excited or when I'm upset, my voice goes up. So I have to be mindful and slow down. So that's me. I don't know about you, but I think probably a lot of people experience that. Hello, Wes. How are you doing? All right. So now we're going to do a little activity. This is called the listening path, self-guided instructor practice. So this is something that you can do on your own later at any time. This activity is designed to help you practice listening as an instructional skill after asking a Socratic question. The focus is not on what to teach, but how accurately you hear a student thinking before responding. You can complete this activity mentally while watching the recording if you watch this back, or later using a real lesson in real time. So think about what we're going to do here and then maybe apply it at your next lesson if you think of it. So there are 6 steps, okay? And this is all written down, and I'm going to show you how you can find this afterwards. So step 1, prepare the listening lens. Before beginning, bring one recent or common Mahjong teaching moment to mind. For example, a discard decision, an exposure choice, or a belief that a hand maybe is blocked, so a need to pivot. So something in the game where you want to make some kind of a teaching point. Review these 4 stages of the listening path. And I'm going to say the 4 words and then I'll explain what they are. So we have attention, curiosity, reflection, confirmation. Attention, you pause your internal teaching script and listen without planning a response. That's attention. That's to be fully attentive. Pause your internal voice and listen without thinking or letting your thoughts come in so that you can't actually hear. Active listening is it's a decision that you make because you've got to quiet the inner voice so that you can truly listen. So that's attention. Curiosity is to listen to understand how the student is thinking, not to evaluate correctness. So you're listening for their understanding, not what you expect, not that, oh, they're going to get it wrong and I'm going to have to jump in there and correct them. You're listening to understand them. Seek first to understand. Stephen Covey quote. Okay, next is reflection. Name what you think the student means, not just what they said. So you may need to paraphrase to get confirmation. If you mirror it back and they confirm, that's fine too, but you might want to paraphrase in your own words to check to see if you've interpreted them correctly. And then finally, confirmation. Check that your interpretation matches the student's intent. What did they mean to say? Did you hear them correctly? Reflect back or mirror what they said so that you can get confirmation. This is a listening discipline, not a performance checklist. It's a discipline. And it will become, I imagine, I'm confessing here, I imagine this will become natural over time because I myself am not here yet. I'm just learning these things myself on active listening. So attention, curiosity, reflection, confirmation, that takes practice. It's a discipline. So it's something that you have to work on. And eventually, with practice, it will become rote. That's the goal. So attention, curiosity, reflection, and confirmation. Those are the processes that you want to go through in your mind while you're in any learning situation, whether you're playing with beginners at a social game, whether you're doing a lesson, or whether you're sharing about something that you learned as an instructor and you're with other instructors. Any kind of learning experience, practice this listening path. Attention, curiosity, reflection, confirmation. Okay, so step 2. Step 2 is to replay a Socratic moment. Recall or imagine asking a Socratic question related to a teaching moment. As you listen to the student's response, either from memory or during an actual lesson, resist the urge to explain, correct, or redirect. This is where self-control comes in. You got to create space. Your only task is to listen using the listening path that we mentioned before: attention, curiosity, reflection, and confirmation. So after the Socratic question, create space so that you can stop that script in your head and truly pay attention, full listening. And then you want to seek first to understand in that space, then reflect or mirror what you heard, and then get confirmation before you speak, before you either ask more questions or instruct. Okay, so step 3 is practice reflection internally. Before choosing any teaching response, silently form a reflective statement. So here are 2 examples. I'm hearing that, blah, blah, blah. So I'm hearing that you feel overwhelmed by all the options on the card. So that is a statement that requires a confirmation. So you could say, I'm hearing that all the options on the card are overwhelming to you right now. Is that right? Is that what you're feeling right now? And then give them space to either confirm or expand on that. So another example is, it sounds like you're thinking ... So it sounds like you're thinking that maybe now is a good time to find another hand to play. Is that right? So instead of just saying, yeah, I think you need to find another hand, you're telling them what to do, but you want to confirm that's their thinking, because maybe they're not. Maybe they're just confused. Maybe they're not looking at the discards out there. Did you look at the discards before you decided whether or not your hand has been weakened or blocked? So more questioning may be needed. So the idea in this step is, you don't want to just solve the problem right away. You want to focus on just naming or mirroring, reflecting what you heard. So you get confirmation before you move to the next step. Now it's going to take time, and through time you'll be practiced and it will go faster. But when you're going through active listening practice, it's going to lengthen the process of any teaching experience or learning experience. And that's okay, because how else will you learn? So just plan that as part of your agenda, that you yourself are going to be learning. So you want to add a little bit of a buffer if you're going to be practicing Socratic questioning, and if you're going to be doing this attention, curiosity, reflection, confirmation, because that's going to take time. You got to leave space for thinking to happen, not just for the student, but for yourself. Okay, so step 4 is check for alignment. You got to ask yourself a couple of questions. Does the reflection match the learner's intent? So did you interpret correctly what you heard? What evidence supports the interpretation? Because you might need to ask more questions. So if it were a live lesson, this is where you would check for understanding before moving on. So you got to get confirmation, check for alignment. And then next, step 5, notice the effect. Pause and reflect on those questions. Here's on these questions, I'm going to give you three questions. Did the learner's thinking become clearer simply through being reflected back? Did the learner's thinking become clearer simply through being reflected back? Another question is, what assumptions did you notice while listening? So your own internal voice, if any. Hopefully you're training yourself to turn off the script. Where did I feel the urge to explain prematurely, to jump in and try to fix or react or respond or correct? You've got to bite your tongue so that learning thinking can happen, and the students can articulate their thoughts so that you can then listen and then mirror back to get confirmation, and then either ask more questions or go to the next learning objective. Okay, so then the last step, carry it forward. The next time you teach, intentionally use the listening path after one Socratic question. So don't overwhelm yourself by asking lots and lots of questions. Just chunk it. there's this phrase called chunking. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. So maybe think in your next lesson, whatever the topic is, come up with a Socratic question, an open-ended question that you could ask at a given moment, and then ask the question and give space for students to respond. So they're going to think, and then they're going to respond. They're going to say something or maybe even ask questions, and you're going to listen and then give yourself space to think before you respond. Mirror it back, reflect it back to them to get confirmation that you interpreted what they said, so that then you could either ask more questions so that they could think clearly and articulate in a way that shows you that they're learning whatever it is you're trying to teach them. And then get that confirmation before moving on to the next learning objective, but only do it with one question and then one listening path. So the listening path again is attention, curiosity, reflection, confirmation. So you ask the question and then you give space for these four, I guess they're components, these four actions: attention, curiosity, reflection, confirmation. So let me see. Wes says the goal to get the student to a solution themselves. Yes. Versus solving their problem. That is absolutely right. You may have already said it. Yeah, that's right. The whole idea of Socratic questioning is to encourage thought. It's to create space that fosters thought, fosters thinking, because you want the students to do the thinking so that they come up with the solutions or the answer themselves, rather than you jumping in and fixing it or giving them the answer. So let's see. I am going to, there's a little bit more on here that I wanted to go through, but I do have kind of an example. I'm trying to think if this is, it kind of goes back to the give a man a fish and he'll eat for the day, but teach a man to fish and he'll eat for life. It kind of goes back to that. So let me just go through the purpose here, and then I'll share just a little example that I've been going through myself lately with somebody. And I won't name names, of course. You won't know them, though. They're not even on this continent. So the purpose of all of this listening with intent is, this is not a pause before explaining. This is not a test of correctness. This is not a performance technique. So you're not going to be creating a pause so that you give them time to respond and then you start explaining. That's not what it's for. You're not also going to wait for them to say something and then you're going to jump in and correct. That's not what this is about. And it's not where you're giving them the stage to perform or you to even perform. It's all about space for thinking to happen and students to articulate, you listening, mirroring back for understanding, and then getting confirmation before your next step. That is the intent. That is the listening path. This is a listening discipline. This is a clarity check. This is instructional support. Listening with intention clarifies the learning state. So you're not withholding learning. You're actually empowering the student because you're fostering their ability to learn how to think. Now, we're all adults, so clearly they know how to think, but we're playing a very complex game, and you don't always want to be giving them the answer. So here's a super quick example of what not to do or how not to teach this game. When you're playing the game and someone walks up and says, "Oh, I've always wanted to learn how to play that mahjong." And then you say, "Well, go ahead and take my seat. Here, sit down, and I'll just sit by you, and you can see what it feels like." So then they get their tiles, and you point to a hand on the card, and you say, "Okay, we're going to do this." So point to that hand, and then you tell them what to do. That's the worst way to teach people how to play this game. It doesn't work. It makes them rely on that person fully. It is not empowering whatsoever. That is not the way to teach this game. Point to a hand on the card? No. That takes a long, long time. And that student, that person does not learn how to do critical thinking on their own, because they're basically borrowing critical thinking from the other person when they need to do it themselves for it to really work for them, especially with adults. It might work for kids because they don't know anything. They don't have a lifetime of experience to leverage, but adults do. So adults learn quite differently than kids. The best leaders are those that create the most leaders. Oh, wow, that's deep. Okay, so here's another example that I could share. So I recently had somebody reach out to me who wanted to learn how to play American Mahjong. They play a different version, a different Western version of the game. And they want to teach the game as well. So they want to learn American Mahjong, and they want to teach other people how to play it in their area, a different continent, okay? And they wanted me to mentor them, to coach them. And I said, well, I'm not doing lessons right now. So I just am not in a position, I don't have the time right now to do that, but I can give you some resources and you can learn yourself, especially if somebody knows how to play a different version. Their learning curve is quite a bit shorter, especially with this particular version that this person knows how to play. So I gave them resources, told them how they can learn on their own just by watching my videos. That's why I have my videos out there and the wiki with everything in it. And they went on their own, but they keep coming back. They keep coming back and asking for things, for confirmation of different rules and what if scenarios. If this, then that, what do I do for this scenario and all this, that, and the other. And so I told this person, first of all, they could not afford my coaching. So they're not a client. They're just a person asking for help, but I just don't have the time to do that right now. I have to make the time to help instructors in the guild, and they're not a guild member. So I just don't have the time to be that giving right now. So I just keep telling them to go to the video, go to the wiki, and they just keep coming back for more. So, and I gave them answers for a little while. I think maybe 3 times. I gave them an answer, talked them through it through chat. It was in a WhatsApp. And I gave them the link every time to the wiki. So, and I told them, this answer to your question is in the wiki. Every time I did that, I told them this answer is in the wiki. And then I gave them the answer and the link to the wiki article. But they keep coming back with more questions that are in the wiki. The last time they asked me a question, I did not answer. And I haven't heard back from them. because I'm hoping after all this time that they know they can find the answer in the wiki. We'll see. I don't know. But if I constantly give them the answer through chat and never tell them where they can find the answer themselves, they're just going to keep coming back and using me as Google. I don't have time to be Google for this person. They need to use the wiki and watch the videos. They can learn it all themselves if they just learn how to use keywords and find the answer themselves in the wiki. So that is just kind of an example of an instructor teaching another instructor, where I had to draw a line. I had to create a boundary, because if I didn't, they're going to keep coming back with the same kind of questions. Like, can I pick up a tile that could have been used to do a joker exchange? No, nope, you can't. And there's a wiki article for that. I think that was the last one they asked for, and I just ignored it. I'm hoping that they went to the wiki. Okay. So teach a man to fish, he'll eat for life. That's the bottom line. Notice how listening with intention reduces the need to over-explain, clarifies the learning state, supports student autonomy. Listening is not a pause before teaching. It is the teaching at this stage. It is the teaching. Listening is the teaching, not only for your student, but yourself. The clearer you hear student thinking, the more precise your instructional choices become. Let's see. It sounds like this one other person who's been bugging you with Ricci questions over the last week. Oh my goodness. Each time you've linked them back to the Ricci with no other commentary yet. At some point, you just give them the source and then eventually just stop responding, because they know to go to that source. Their questions are in their questions can be answered in that source. They just have to learn how to use the right keywords to find it. They've got to learn how to think through their needs and use their own troubleshooting to find their solution. And that does take a little bit of time. So you might, I don't know if you've talked about with how to use a wiki using keywords, that you want to use minimal words. So for example, when I search my own wiki, I might put how many tiles to find the article on what happens if someone doesn't have the right number of tiles, or right number of tiles. Or you could say mahjong in error, and that's it. Just 2-3 words is all you need. And then you'll see the list in the results and figure out which one of those applies. And then read. That's another thing, is that nowadays, I think there's this I think what's expected by a lot of people, younger people, I'm thinking, like let's say less than 40, okay, is for everything to be handed to them. You know, using you as Google and you giving them the answer. No, we're not an answer giving. We're going to give you the answer and then provide a source so that you can make that connection yourself and then use the source yourself eventually. So it's about empowering. We want to empower people to find the answer themselves. It's a little challenging, though, when it comes to social media, because in social media, especially with big groups, you don't know the skill set of the person asking the questions. They may not, for example, know that there's a search feature in social media. They may not know that MAHJLIFE has a wiki. They may not know that you could Google just a basic question about mahjong and get answers, even from Google. Now, it may not be right. It may not be applicable to the version that you're asking about. They've got to know how to answer to write the question so that it gives enough context for AI to provide the right answer. So for example, can a joker be exchanged in an exposure or something like that? Well, you got to tell it, first of all, we're playing American Mahjong, not Vietnamese Mahjong or Malaysian Mahjong, other versions that use jokers. We're playing American Mahjong. So some people may not know that you got to provide context with your questions. So, and that's talking about social media. And I'm just thinking about how many times I have to answer the same questions every day that come up all the time, frequently asked questions. People don't know to use search features. People don't understand that you've got to read the thread and click all comments in order to see the first comment, which is where I always answer with the source of the rule right there at the top. People don't know to do that. And sometimes within a thread, the members of the community are trying to train the other people in there. Okay, you need to click all comments and go all the way to the top to see the answer with a source, or you need to use the search feature. You know, there's this training going on within the community. It's a group effort. It takes a village to raise a Mahjong player, okay? Something is interfering with your internet connection. Oh, okay. Hey, sorry. Sorry, Sophie. Well, a lot of people, it seems nowadays, just have this instant gratification, this need for instant gratification. Some things take time. And learning how to play American Mahjong takes time. Any version of Mahjong, if you want to play it deeply, if you want to play it beyond the superficial level. Because you can do anything at a superficial level and look like you're getting by. But if you want to do something deeply, play Mahjong at a deep level, it's going to take time and effort. It's not something that you can learn overnight. You can't just read a book and know how to play this game, or sit down once, pick up the tiles and play. If maybe you play Hong Kong Mahjong and you sit down with an American Mahjong card and try to play, that's not going to work. No, it is not the same game. It is completely different. Let's see. You think the assumption of people need instant gratification is harmful to those of us who do, in fact, put time. Okay, so I said I wasn't making a blanket statement, Sophie. I'm just saying it seems that a lot of people, based on my experience, have a need for instant gratification and that they want answers handed to them. I'm not saying everybody is like that. I have a son who lives in my own home, and I don't assume that. So I apologize if I offended you. That wasn't my intent. I just think with the age of AI and the age of social media, that a lot of younger people are being trained to expect a lot. There's like this, it seems like a lot of people have this need for instant gratification, and that's just not possible. Two people with different views on this question meet, everyone's unhappy. Sophie says, you think there's definitely two schools of thought on the question, should the effort of answering a question fall on the questioner or the answerer? It is a partnership, because if the questioner did not ask the right question, that is going to be likely, that's going to result in getting the wrong response. And then the response comes out and maybe the questioner is not fully listening. So there are all kinds of things that can happen that can go awry. That's why we're talking about this, because we want to listen intently and train ourselves, be disciplined in our approach when teaching the game, and use Socratic questions, and then using this listening journey this listening path so that we slow down and create space so that we can fully listen. Attention, curiosity, reflection, confirmation. That's the discipline that I'm challenging right now. Everybody, not just you, me too, because I tend to jump. I tend to jump in and want to fix and correct and move on, because there's an agenda. So we all need to slow down and learn how to truly listen. Okay, so now the reflections. Which part of the listening process do you tend to skip when you're under time pressure? I'll give you a couple seconds. For me, it's reflecting. I basically maybe ask the question, listen for the response, and say, okay, let's do this. Okay, so I just don't reflect and skip the next two. So really it's the next three. I ask the question and listen and then confirm that they got it and then move on. So I skip the reflection and then I skip the confirmation. So I'm going to start doing these 4 things. Reflecting, yeah, because we have an agenda. I mean, it's just human nature to want to go to the next step. But I think if we slow down, we're going to save time on the end. Because if we don't catch where there's a misunderstanding or where the learning objective didn't quite hit the mark, that we're going to have to come back and review anyway. So time will be lost regardless. You tend to miss the 47 minutes of the listening process, by which you mean you arrived 40 minutes late. You can watch the repost and then read this whole episode notes here that I'm going to show you how to get to. Okay, so for me, confession, I skip the reflection, which is step 2 or step 3? It's attention, curiosity. So I do those 2 things really well. And I've learned how to do Socratic questioning. I've been studying it for about 3 weeks now, and I'm sure I have a long way to go. I've only just learned about Socratic questioning as far as teaching in probably the last, I guess, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. So it's still fairly new to me, but I've been making a concerted effort to change the way I communicate. So Socratic questioning followed by attention, full listening, curiosity, reflection, confirmation. So I do the attention, the curiosity, but then I just move on if they get it, where I should do the reflection and then get confirmation before moving on. So I need to do the 4. It's a 4-step process, a 4-step discipline. Okay, so the next one is, how might more accurate listening change when and how often you intervene during a lesson? How might more accurate listening change when and how often you intervene during a lesson? I wonder too, though, if this would be, let's just ask this way. How might more learning, how might more depth of learning change when and how often you need to intervene during a lesson? Because intervening disrupts the learning and the thinking. So you got to pull back and let the learning happen. Let it blossom. You've got to give it space. Even if mistakes are made, that's okay, because people learn through mistakes. Okay, and the last reflection is how could active, oh, I'm sorry, there's one more and then one after. So there's 4 total. So number 3, what would it look like to treat listening as an instructional move rather than a courtesy? What would it look like to treat listening as an instructional move, I'd say technique, rather than a courtesy? That it would be intentional, that listening becomes an intentional part of your teaching style. This reminds me of my husband. He's a really amazing listener and he's very thoughtful. So you ask him a question, you got to give him time to think. I know to be quiet and let him think before he gives me an answer. And sometimes I wonder if he forgot what I said, but eventually he gives me an answer because he thinks. Some people take longer to think things through than others. So you have to create that space. And if you incorporate that active listening into your own teaching style, that you may find that you have to intervene less by giving people that time to think and learn. Okay, so the final question, the final reflection, how could active listening increase both student confidence and your own instructional trust? These are all really good. This is something that probably I would want to look at and on an annual basis, almost like a, oh, makes me cringe. Like when I think about employee reviews, you know, when you work at some place where they do an annual review and you reflect on your performance, your job performance, and you ask yourself certain questions. How did I do? How am I performing? Where are my areas for improvement? Oh my gosh. Anyway, I'm kind of thinking that this would be a good thing to look at on an annual basis, because by nature, we're going to want to get the agenda done. We're going to want to get through our lesson plan, but we've got to leave space for thinking. We've got to leave space for the learning to happen. All right, so that ends the topic for today. Let me show you how to get to the show notes. If you're new to the Learning Lab Instructor Edition, I'm going to show you how to get to this repository. It's basically a wiki for this series that we do on Thursdays. There's a wiki in and of itself just for instructors. So let me show you how to get to it. And if you have any questions along the way, write them in the comments section or the live stream chat. Think of it as a New Year's, a resolution. I don't do resolutions. I just create goals for myself and then usually forget them and move on to the next thing. Sometimes I remember if I write it down, and this is written down, so I'll be able to come back to it. Okay, now let me share my screen. We're all on a learning journey. Okay, so here's my website. So from the website, to get to the Learning Lab, let me go to this one here. Okay, so now here we are on the home page. You're going to go to Instructors and then down to Learning Lab. Now, it may be the 3rd or 4th one down, depending on whether or not you're logged in, or some people don't even have a login, so it's going to be different. And then from the Learning Lab, you can learn all about it. Here, it's basically a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that's managed by vetted instructors. So even instructors can go there and learn, because you can observe other instructors answering questions. So it's a wonderful learning opportunity. I highly recommend that you check it out. At the very bottom, it talks through what it's all about and then how you can join. If you're an instructor, you can join as a player. If you're in the guild, you can join as an associate, which is a learning instructor, and then as a mentor if you have taken and passed the rules trek in the Merit program. Okay, so then back up here at the top, there's a button, Instructor Edition Content. That's what you want to click on. And then it's going to take you to this place here, Learning Lab Instructor Edition, which is this live stream, Resource Hub. This is called a Resource Hub. It's basically a wiki. So it looks just like the wiki. It's the same feature. And you would just put in keyword searches to find what you're looking for. You could also look at articles by category right here, 6 different categories. And then down below is the featured articles, popular articles, then newest and recently updated. So if you go to newest at 11 a.m. Eastern time on Thursdays, the next article will be posted. So next week at 11 a.m., if you want to see what the topic of interest is going to be for that particular episode, it will post at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So this one was Listening with Intention episode, and then it's the YYYY month, day format. You just click on that and it will open the episode show notes with everything that we talked about. So I did some reading. I mentioned the first in the series. This is a 3-part series. Eventually there'll be a link to this video so you can watch the video again. There's our talking points that we went through, the activity with the path right here, the listening path. I challenge you to do this as a discipline going forward and see how it changes and refines your teaching style. And then the reflections that we just went through. Okay, so that's how you get to the Resource Hub, Learning Lab Instructor Edition Resource Hub. I hope you found this helpful. It is a high calling. Teaching in and of itself is a high calling, but to incorporate active listening as part of your teaching style, it's huge. It takes a lot of discipline, something I myself am working on. It's something that I have been studying. I've created a tool on Socratic questioning, and this listening component is going to be key for that. I need to go back through my documentation and make sure that I have active listening as part of the documentation, because if you ask a question, well, actually the students are going to be asking the questions themselves. They need to give themselves space to think things through. So games are going to take a little longer if Socratic questioning comes in to lessons or gameplay, guided games, for example, guided groups. If you use Socratic questioning, it's going to take longer. Games will take longer, but the learning will be deeper and understanding will happen, and the players will be able to take ownership of what they learn rather than just being spoon-fed information. So it's a lot to consider. So think about it and review these show notes and let me know what your thoughts are. Come back and write your comments in the space below the video, because I'd love to hear back from you. Now, next week, we are going to do the third in this series, the third installment, I guess, the third episode. It's a 3-episode series. And this is going to be, we're going to talk about what to do next. So we did Socratic questioning in the first episode, and then active listening, and then what to do next, the next step after that. After you have confirmed your interpretation, what do you then do next? Let me tell you what the actual title of it is, though. So hold on one second. I can tell you what it will be. We'll see if my website cooperates. Yes. No, it did not. It did not cooperate. I don't know why these filters don't work. What the heck? Because I have actually 3 wikis. So I have to get the right wiki up in the back end. Come on. See, even I want instant gratification here. What? That's not what I asked for. What? I didn't click on that. It just created a new knowledge base. I didn't even ask it to do that. Okay, here it is. Sorry about that. All right, now, so next week is going to be the 15th. So responding with precision. That's the topic for next week. So Socratic questioning was last week. Active listening was this week. And then responding with precision is next week. So if you missed the first 2 in the series, go back and watch those. And you know what I could do is put a link to them in the video description below so that you can get to them. And you should actually see at the end of the video, it'll come up with a video that you can watch. And if you click on that, you should be able to go back to the previous. But I'll put links to the previous episode and then the 3 in a series in each of the 3 videos. So you can click through them and watch them. The most important one, of course, is the first one on Socratic questioning. And then the second on that we did today on active listening, because it's all part of the same whole. They're parts of the same whole. It's going to complete it's going to have a complete result. So next week will be on responding with precision. So I hope that you will join us for that. It looks like I need to get it scheduled. It's not even scheduled. I have it ready, but I got to get it scheduled. So that'll be up at 11 a.m. next week. Thank you very much for hanging out with me today. Again, please use the comment section below the video to share your thoughts about today's topic, active listening. And if you'd like to carry the conversation on further, feel free to reach out to me by email. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, consider subscribing. Click the little gray bell if you do. That way you'll get notification for when I post new videos, and you won't miss an opportunity to learn a new strategy or pick up an insight to the game that could give you an advantage at the table. Between now and the next video, may all your picks be keepers.